Hello everyone, and welcome to my podcast. This is Ann P. of Fiber, Floss, and Fiction. Today is Monday, January the 25th, 2021. So Happy New Year to everyone. The last time I filmed was at the very end of 2020, so this is my first podcast for the new year, and I've got loads to talk about because I'm a little bit later than my usual kind of 2-week time frame. It's been 3+, so I would say get a beverage, get something to craft with. I don't know how long this one will be, but I suspect a fairly long one. I've got piles of stuff on both sides to share with you all that I've been working on. So, quick life update. Firmly here into the new year. Happy to report that I got my first dose of the COVID vaccine about a week ago, and scheduled for my next one in early February, so I will be delighted to have that on board. My husband is going to probably wind up having to travel in February, so this will hopefully mean that he will not have to quarantine himself. He still has not gotten his, but fingers crossed, hopefully that'll happen soon. The other bit of kind of personal life update. Some of you may know I, in a previous life, worked for a company that did medical records, transcription, and I did training and some other things for that company. And I have been doing some contract work over the past couple of years, very minor, I guess, like not full-time. But with everything that they've been working on, this local hospital group I've been working for actually funded me for more like full-time work. So I've been busy doing that, but it's also involved a lot of Zoom calls, which means longer work days for me. But I've had the opportunity to sit and knit on a lot of those calls because I can do that and still take notes and concentrate and listen to the presentations and things like that. So kind of heavy on the knitting this go round. And while I have gotten a lot of stuff done on my cross stitch, it's been on a limited number of projects because I'm trying to focus on some pieces for this year. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and talk knitting. Just making myself notes, sorry. Okay. So I have a stack of finished items to share with you guys in the world of knitting. As always, I will put links down below to the Ravelry pattern page, and most of these are going to be going in one of two charity type gift boxes. So not really for anybody, but they're projects that I've been working on as part of my Stash Down 2021. So the first is this cute little hat. It is the Barnwood hat. I had knit a project from this yarn, which is the Cephalopod Travelers DK weight, last year. And so I had just a little over 100 yards left, like 120 yards. So I went ahead and knit the child size of this particular project, which is kind of just a lacy open pattern. It's got just gathered decreases on the top, and it's technically a child size, but it's big enough I could wear it as a beanie. It's not super deep, but the circumference is big enough because it's pretty stretchy with the lace. So I wound up finishing up the entire skein of yarn to get this one finished. I had just a few yards left over, so that's perfect. So that's the first one. That's again the Barnwood hat. Pattern is by Alicia Plummer. And I will probably knit that one again at some point. It's a great stash buster, like low yardage kind of project. All right, the next piece is the No Harm, No Cowl, which you saw me working on for my last video, but I have finished it. It is off the needles. So this is a slightly oversized but shaped cowl. So you cast on here and knit down to here where you start to increase so that the cowl actually flares out. So I can just get it down my shoulders, but when you wear it, it also is very drapey and super snuggly. I guess you could wear it folded over if you wanted to, but there's so much pretty colors and stitch patterns on it. I don't know why you would want to. So it's sort of a sampler cowl. There's some very basic, just like knit and purl stitches. There's some slip stitch sections. This is also slip stitch and seed stitch down here at the bottom. So I knit this with a, let's see, I think it's called the Yowza Mini Trio Packs from Miss Babs. They basically curate colors that they feel will go together, and then you get a half skein of their Yowza, which is the DK weight, their DK weight merino yarn. So the colors in this are dark adobe, lurch, L-U-R-C-H, like Lurch from the Addams Family, and rainbow jasper, which is the really cool multicolor. And I have plenty left over of each of these. I only used about a half of the half skein, so like a quarter skein, to knit this project. So I have plenty to do a hat with, and I'm thinking of mixing and matching a few different options there to use up my remnants for that. So that is finished. And this is a really great beginner project if you are interested in working on learning slip stitch or just doing a fast and easy project. If you're a more experienced knitter, this is a really good one. It uses total maybe about 300 yards, 350 yards, something like that. I didn't weigh my skeins, so excuse me, I just know I have some left of each of those. Okay, next up, another hat. This is the Endell, E-N-D-E-L-L hat, and it's for fingering weight, color work, stranded knitting. I pulled out 2 skeins of Rowan's Scottish Tweed 4-ply that I had in my stash. I have oodles and oodles of that lightweight fingering weight type yarn. So I just picked 2 colors that had good contrast and knit this one up. This is actually the small small size in the pattern. It's pretty big. I don't think that I'm not sure who the large would fit. This is a pretty good sized hat. You probably could scale it down by taking out 1 round of this. I used, and this was the frustrating part, I used an entire ball of the kind of cranberry color, and then like 6 yards of a second ball to knit it. I was over her yardage requirements by about 12 yards. So I'm not sure if the pattern was like super exact and that's exactly what she used, or I'm not sure, because I actually got gauge. So this is the called for gauge. So I shouldn't have eaten up more yarn than the pattern called for, but at any rate. And then about 96 yards, so almost another full ball of the pale gray. And I really like the fact that I think you can see that, she's done the decreases on the top so that they look kind of like flower petals coming out like a dahlia or some other kind of multi-petaled flower. And then these ginkgo leaves, which I think look very arts and crafts themed. I think I would like to try this hat again using a slightly plumper yarn. The jumper weight yarns that are kind of the more traditional Fair Isle weight yarns are a little bit light, I think, for what she was going for with this pattern. But I do really like the design, and it was a very fun knit. So that one is done. Okay, next is another cowl that I was interested in making to use up more yarn. I still didn't quite finish the last of this DK, but I did finish the cowl. This is the Ikigai cowl. It was originally designed for a hand paint yarn, a multicolored yarn, But I had this Spirit Trail Fiberworks Brigantia in stash, and I love the colorway, which is called Wisteria. Unfortunately, Jennifer is not dyeing anymore, so I mean, you could probably find it on Ravelry in someone's stash, but in terms of a website, she's no longer in business. Super simple cowl, looks like it has cables, but everything is done with a slip stitch and a yarn over, and it's, you know, nicely stretchy. I think I did one less repeat in terms of height that it called for, and I took off doing the math in my head, 6 repeats in the circumference because I felt like it was going to be too wide around if I knit it to the pattern specifications. But it's a simple pattern and it's only 4 stitches for each repeat, so it was easy to do the math and just pull out what I wanted to in terms of the motif multiple to make this a little bit smaller. So the pattern called for about 135 yards and I had 140, and I thought, great, that'll be fine. But I still have, I think I still have like 86 or 90 yards left, which is still enough to do something with. So this is a gorgeous wool silk blend, so it has a nice drape, and bring it closer to show you the detail. Is warm and very soft, so also very glad to have at least a little more of that stash out of the leftover bin. Told you I've been doing a lot of knitting. Next, this is the Shaylin shawl. This is a sport weight shawl, which you don't see very often, and I had 2 skeins of Watershed, which is a Harrisville Designs sport weight, in this great tweedy brown color. So lots of fun colors going on in the yarn. I had exactly enough basically to knit this. These are the number of repeats as written. I wound up having to pull out the last row of garter stitch in order to get it bound off. Like, I had that little yarn. I think I had this much of an end left when I finished the whole thing. So it's not a super huge shawl, but it's enough to either wrap around the back and secure with a pin, or to wrap in the front and bring the ends around like a cowl would be. So I have knit this once before, and I used a hand spun yarn for it, and it came out great. And it's a fairly simple pattern. I would say if you want to tackle it for kind of a first lace project, that it's really helpful to put markers in between kind of each of these big motifs, because it does get a little confusing about how everything lines up if you've never done lace before. But then it's got, you know, sections of stockinette, and those go really fast. So I blocked it fairly vigorously. It's on larger needles, so it comes pretty open. And I have a friend who had commented on it when I showed it on Instagram, and she really loved it, and she loved the color and kind of the tweediness of it. So I'm going to send it to her as just a surprise little gift. So that one's not technically going in the charity box, but it is being gifted. And I used 2 full skeins of the Watershed and got those out of my stash. They were leftovers from a sweater project that I did several years ago. So another good one to have out of stash and into life. Okay, next, I only have one of these, but so this is kind of a work in progress sock. I have the second one yet to cast on. So this is Bow Ties Are Cool is the name of the sock pattern, and it's got little teeny tiny knit purl motifs that do kind of look like bow ties, but they also sort of look like snowflakes or just little small doodads. They're not eyelets, they're not actually open. What you're seeing is the shadows from where the purl indents go. I knit these mostly as written, except the leg length called for 2 more repeats, which I thought would be too long. They'd be almost knee-high on me, which I didn't want, and I don't have enough yarn for them. I'm kind of playing yarn chicken on number 2 as it is. This is a normal heel flap, heel turn, and then a wide toe here at the end. The yarn is from Yarn Co. It's their sock yarn. Excuse me. Sorry. Yarn Co. in the colorway Labradorite, which is this cool, slightly mottled blue with some blacks, navy blues, and greens kind of playing underneath. These fit really nicely. So I will be casting on sock number 2 at some point here, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that's where I am, all of those projects. And I have one other, here it is, got buried. I have several other projects that are actually in progress and on the needles. I've been working on my broadleaf sweater. I showed you that from last time. I did not bring it to show you today because I finished the front and I'm actually blocking that. So it's downstairs on blocking boards, and I'll bring it next time, where hopefully I'll be further along and might even have the back finished by the next time you and I talk. So that is a big project that's on the needles. And then I have been participating again for this term, which will be January, February, March, the winter term, of the Harry Potter Knit and Crochet group, Harry Potter Knit and Crochet House Cup group on Ravelry, which has been super fun because it's been motivating me to work through a lot of stash leftovers and smaller projects that, you know, I want the stash made into things. I don't want it sitting. So it's been good for that because I can feel justified knitting something for one of their challenge prompts and have it go into the charity box, and it's another skein or 2 out of stash. So that's awesome. Right now we are doing one of the Quidditch matches for this term, and this is the longest one. It's almost 3 weeks, and it's encouraging you to do something that requires endurance as part of your Quidditch training. So I have a whole shoebox bin, it's actually several shoebox size bins of minis that I've picked up over the course of things. Sometimes if I want to just try a dyer out or try out a type of yarn that I haven't used before, I'll order a mini if they have it and just see how it knits up. But I have a lot of those that have accumulated. So I have been earmarking them for a larger project in order to try to use up some of them. So I cast on for this Quidditch match for the Adventurous Wrap, which is by Amba O'Brien, and she has a ton of different mini themed projects, meaning mini skein themed projects. This was, I think, a couple of years ago, maybe 2019 or even earlier. And it's knit with 2 triangles, and then you flip one and join it so it becomes a parallelogram, kind of long wrap with pointed ends. And so I chose this for my endurance project because it's actually a fair amount of yardage. I think it winds up being almost 1,200 yards by the time you're done. But it's also all garter stitch, which is not one of my favorites to just knit. I know people find it soothing and everything, but I just want to power through it, which is not soothing. But I have found that it's great for Zoom calls because I can just knit on it and it doesn't take any brain power. I don't have to read instructions or read the chart or whatever. So this is the first half that's finished. This is all of the kind of warm colors I'll be using, loads of speckled dyes and lots of gradient action happening. Bring that in a little closer so you can see some of the colors. That's pretty close. So the other half, which I've started, is more blues, grays, greens. It's cooler colors. So I've just been knitting away on that, and that's been kind of my primary focus because it needs to be done by, I believe it's the 8th of February. I'm not totally sure that's the right number, but 2 weeks from now, basically, it needs to be accomplished. So knitting away on that. That's kind of my primary focus. I have another mini skein / advent type calendar project planned for February. So I've just cast that on. It's really, I mean, it's this big, it's hardly anything to show you. So I'll bring that next time so that you can see it. But those have been fun just to play around with the colors and see how things work together. So I've been really enjoying those. I think that's it for now for knitting. Oh, one other thing. I'll put a link below. I will be teaching 2 classes in February for Stitches. I think they're calling it Expo at Home. So these are slightly shorter format classes. One's a 2-hour class and the other is 2 2-hour classes for a total of 4 class hours. The first one is on steeks. So that will be available through them. And the other one is on designing your own lace shawl. So I'll put a link to my teaching page down below if you have interest in those. They are virtual, so you can, be in the comfort of your own home and take one, take both. They've got a bunch of other great classes. So if you're interested in participating in that, you can also go through their other teacher profiles and see what other things they're offering for that one. I will not be teaching in March or April. Taking a couple of months off to do some other personal weekending things. And so then we'll see kind of what the rest of the year brings. But the next up are the ones in February. Okay, we're going to go on and we're going to talk books. So I have been doing a ton of reading. A ton of reading. So I'm going to go over these at a fairly high level. If you have questions or want to know more about any of the books that I mention, and I will include their Goodreads links down below. But if you have further questions in terms of my opinions on these books, please feel free to leave me a comment. I'm happy to tell you more about them. It's just, I have 6 to get through, which is quite a bit, and I know you guys don't want to be here for 2 hours listening to me talk, so let's go with the high level version. Okay, let's start out first with 2 books by the same author. These are both British mysteries. The author is J.R. Ellis, and these are books 2 and 3 in this particular series that he's written. I read book 1. You can read about or listen to me talk about that in my previous video. So these 2 books are The Quartet Murders and Murder at Redmire Hall. So these are the same cast of characters that were in the first book that I read last month. It's a smaller British town set basically in Yorkshire, and the main kind of chief detective is, and they refer to this several times throughout the book, he's kind of interested in solving murders the way Poirot of Agatha Christie's mysteries solved crime, the little gray cells. So he has a not great personal life, but he is somebody who's very committed to his job and very tied to his job. And so he kind of knows all these odd avenues to look for answers in. And he's bringing along these 2 other detectives who report to him in terms of like figuring out how not to just sort of plow into a problem and to sit back and let the information tell you the story. So the Quartet Murders focuses on a string quartet that's playing at a small musical venue, and one of the four is murdered in full view of the audience. So they have to figure out, and this person's violin, which happens to be a Stradivarius, is stolen. So they're figuring out not only the murder, but also the theft of this priceless instrument. The second one, Murder at Redmire Hall, is set on this large estate with kind of an eccentric owner who, his father had this disappearing room magic trick, and he's decided to revive it. He's trying to figure out ways to bolster the income of the estate, and so he's going to have this grand reveal televised, and he's sure tons of people will come. So he organizes all of this. He actually invites this senior police detective to come and observe, to kind of show everybody that it's all above board, and the police have investigated, and it's an impossible mystery kind of thing. And he does this magic trick and is found dead. So they're trying to figure out, obviously, who killed him and how this affects the livelihood of this estate. And it's a little bit like Clue, because pretty much everybody who's at the event, other than the police, have a motive. This guy is not very well liked, and there's almost no one in his family who wouldn't have done it. So both of those, quite good, quite fun if you like that British mystery genre. Okay, next up is a book called Call the Nurse, written by Mary McLeod. So this is kind of like James Herriot's All Things Great and Small, only it's with people. This woman and her family, it's nonfiction. It's her reminiscences of working as a nurse on an island in the Hebrides. She's put a fictitious name to it, but it's apparently the Isle of Lewis. She and her husband were mainlanders. They were English, and they sell their house and bring their two youngest kids to this fairly remote island, which is very sort of steeped in tradition, and people are just getting electricity and just getting a TV and that kind of thing, even though it's 1970. They're still very tied to the land and the old ways, and she's sort of their last line of defense, because if you have something serious, you either have to get on a boat or you have to be medical helicoptered back to the mainland for treatment. So it is about her learning not only about the island's traditions, but she comes to know the inhabitants really well. She has kind of a set driving tour that she does, almost like a visiting nurse would do, to like give insulin shots and check up on the elderly and things like that. But then she also handles emergencies, and she winds up being sort of the local coroner, where she has to sign off on like time of death and kind of things like that. So it's a little bit dated because it's 1970 that she's writing about, but it's kind of an interesting portrait of being assimilated into this culture that is at least 50 years, maybe 100 in some instances, behind the times. I enjoyed it. I love that part of the world. So it was just fun to to read about how she settles into island life. Let's see. Okay. Briefly we'll mention, this is a Regency romance that I read. I enjoy this author. Her name is Mary Balogh. She's got oodles of books, so you may have run into her before. Someone to Care, it's, I think, the fourth she tends to write in like family sets. So it'll be like a group of sisters and a brother. She kind of tells all of their stories, or a group of four friends, and she tells all of their stories in individual books that are kind of clustered around one family. And I think this is the fourth in a series that this is the mother, and there's two daughters and a son who have other stories in this little is that right? Quadruple set of books. Typical for this author, she is fairly formulaic, but they're light reads, they're easy reads, lots of Regency manners, lots of misunderstandings, and how society forces people to make choices that they might not normally make if they were allowed to have kind of their own free will. So good for what it was. It's, like I said, it's a very light, easy read. So then the last two that I have, the first one are both fantasy, epic fantasy. The first of which is King of Scars, which is by Leigh Bardugo. I've read several other books by her last year, really loved them. This is in her Six of Crows series, but it's kind of a standalone book. It pulls in one of the main characters from the Six of Crows, who is a young woman who she's definitely part of the Six of Crows story, but this goes on after that book has finished. And all of this author's books are set in something she calls the Grisha verse. So the Grisha are the people who inhabit her world, who have magical powers, and they're fairly specialized. Some are kind of healers, or they can influence physical things to certain people, like control their heartbeat, control their breathing. Some can control the wind or the atmosphere. Some are gifted where they can manipulate how somebody looks, kind of like plastic surgeons. So this follows Nina, who has been sent as, she's been transformed, her overall features look different, and she's been sent undercover as a spy to work kind of in the southern end of this world. And she's in her early 20s, but she's still fairly kind of beat up by life. And the second kind of parallel story is on Prince Nikolai, who is now King Nikolai, who does not have Grisha powers, but he is kind of decided that his kingdom is going to be a refuge for Grishas. They won't be ostracized, but they also won't be exploited for their talents. He's trying to have this be kind of a safe place to recognize all their amazing gifts. And his main character has been through the wars that are in other of Leigh Bardugo's books that are in this Grisha verse. So he's come to power. He's got a good group of advisors around him. He's trying to solve these problems of being a fairly small country surrounded by powerful countries, and figure out how to fund the social reforms he wants to make, and also deal with a large list of kind of personal problems, which I won't spoil, but he has to struggle through. So I didn't, and I should say I would consider this young adult. I'm not sure if it's marked that way, but I would. This one I did not enjoy as much as her other books. I really liked Ninth House, and I really liked Six of Crows. I did not like this as much. I felt it really could have been edited down. There's another book after this in this same kind of mini series within this larger series that follows more about King Nikolai. I did like the fact that this author chooses not to place her kind of historical feeling fantasy in a British context. She actually draws a lot from like Slavic and Russian folklore, and there's a lot of symbolism and things that are tied into this book that are reflective of that. So I enjoyed that part of it. But I think I would read others of hers first if you're interested in a fantasy title by this author that's young adult, and maybe save this if you become a rabid fan down the road. Okay, the last book I wanted to mention that I finished is called The House of Earth and Blood. It's Crescent City #1, and the author is Sarah Maas, who is the author of A Court of Thorns and Roses. She, I think, is well known for her young adult books. This is not a young adult book at all. It's much grittier. It's got a lot more descriptive passages in it. It's not something I would consider young adult. It's more urban fantasy. And I know Kim over at Spartan Stitcher, I know you had started it and didn't get into it. It's a very different feel than her other books, but still set with fantasy and another very strong female hero, whichever you want to call her. Our main character is a changeling. She's half human, half fae. She's never really been accepted as a member of the fae court. And she is, I guess forced is a good word. She's forced to make a living like a normal human would, working as the assistant to an antiquities dealer. And it's not normal antiquities, of course, because, it's like the sword of power and the stone of whatever. And so everything kind of has a magical undercurrent to it. In this urban setting, she's kind of the party girl, and her roommate is a shifter who's kind of the head of one of the local werewolf packs or wolf packs who guard the city and are kind of paramilitary troops. Above them, there's another group who also perform some police type duties, but they also do more military duties, that are the fallen angels. And so she gets involved with this horrible crime that happens that involves her wolf shifter best friend. And while she doesn't feel she has a lot to offer to help solve this, because she doesn't have any of these fairy-based powers, I mean, her human side shows up a lot, she kind of throws herself into it with abandon because she wants to clear her friend's name. So there's a lot of pretty gritty and gory battle scenes. There's a fair amount of sexual tension, and it's a much bleaker overall view. I mean, the city has drug dealers and, clubs where you go where people slip stuff in your drinks, and you kind of have to claw and fight your way through everything. And many of the supernatural beings the groups of them do not like each other. Like the fairies do not particularly like the archangels. Many of them are enslaved. So if you like grittier stuff, this one might be more down your path of interest. Otherwise, I would say if you just like the style of her other books, to stick with the Thorns and Roses or Court of Glass, I think it is. Those are more similar in feel than this book. This book felt to me like it was kind of a different author in some respects. So anyway, depending on where you fall in that continuum for fantasy reads, you may or may not enjoy it. I will also say it's a fairly long book. I think it's almost 700 pages, so be prepared if you start it. It will take you a while to get through. I'm currently reading 2 books, one of which I'm listening to, called The Guinevere Deception, which is a retelling of the Arthur and Guinevere and Camelot story, which I have been enjoying so far, but I'm a little hesitant to listen to the last hour of it, because I understand that there's a cliffhanger at the end before you get to book 2, in which nothing is resolved until you get to book 3, which isn't out yet. So we'll see how I feel about that when I get there. And the other one is called The Mermaid and the Strongman, which I just started. An interesting read I had in my Audible or Kindle library that is set in the early 1900s in a town that I think is supposed to stand in for Pittsburgh or some other West Pennsylvania mining town. So that one's kind of sucked me in, but I will report on those once I get them finished next go round. Okay, so that's it for books this time. Like I said, all of the links to books will be down in the box below to my Goodreads account, so you can hopefully find them there if that is of interest and you think you want to check out some more information about them. Or please feel free to leave me a comment if you would like to have more details in terms of my perspective on them. All right, moving on to cross stitch. So in cross stitch, I do not have a ton of different projects to show you all, but I have had quite a bit of progress. You might remember with my whip parade video, I talked about the fact that I was going to try to focus on several things so that I made more progress, just less items to show you guys. And so that is what I have been doing. Let me start first with the non-full coverage piece that was my focus for this month. I'm going to be working on this one. Well, I have worked on this one 10 days in January, so I'm done working on it this month. It'll be back for 10 days in February and 10 days in March. This is the Joan Elliott pattern called Celtic Wheel, and I'm going to show this again. This, as far as I know, this pattern is not available online. It is not. I know it's not in her shop. I don't think you can buy it as a PDF from any place. I think the only place you can buy it is Bewitching Cross Stitch This Book, but it is available on Amazon last time I checked, and I'm sure it's available like eBay and that kind of thing. So the piece is this one. So it's shown as a cushion here. I will not be finishing it that way, but it is all of the 8 festivals of the Celtic year. So it's got Yule all the way down through Midsummer and back to Samhain here at the end. Is that right? Did I go the right way? Yeah. So I was at the halfway point on this project at the end of December, and I would really like to try to get it finished completely this year, and I feel like I have fairly good chance of doing that. I'm not sure 20 days more will completely finish it, but I think it's going to be pretty close. So everything above this line I had accomplished this past year. I finished this quarter this past year. So I have started working on the third page of the 4. It's not a huge project. And so everything from here down I have completed. I have most of the knot work finished. I have a few things that I left, like this brown is repeated down here, so I'm just going to do them at the same time when I start moving that way. And same here for this, because this figure is going to be repeated here. A lot of the stitches that are in here are like 3 and 4 stitches of one color and then you switch, so it's almost easier to just work them all at one time. But I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. I started the grapes that are here. Got the leaves finished and started on the purple. This is done, and this is done down to here, except for that one little brown spot. And you will notice that it is missing the back stitching. But I have the festival names to backstitch in here. So again, when I have one strand of thread on my needles, I will do all of that at once, because that's all in 310. So this is being stitched 2 strands of floss over 2 fabric threads. This is a 32 count even weave from Color and Cotton. It is called Sampler Gold. And you can't really see it maybe, but I have quite a bit that I will be able to use when I'm done this project, which is fantastic because I have other things I think this would be a great fabric to use. It's a wonderful neutral with just a little bit of modeling. It kind of reminds me almost like of a old-fashioned map or parchment kind of thing. Using all the called for DMC threads on this one. No swap outs on that. So I think this will be out again. No, I know this will be out again in February. And my plan, I think what I'm going to try to do is get this motif and this one that's the rose for Midsummer stitched, and then start down here and come across and keep going that way. The knot work is not hard and it doesn't have any back stitching, but what I found out from working these upper two pieces is it really benefits from working the navy blue first and then going back and filling in the gold, because there are two colors. You probably can't see this, but there are two colors of gold thread used in that, and it gets very confusing where you have like two spaces that are skipped and you think, did I miss something, or is that supposed to be the other color? And it just requires a lot of chart focus. So that's the plan for this one, I think, is to do the same thing when I get to this corner. So I feel like I'm in pretty good shape on this. I'm pleased with how much I got done in 10 days, because that's quite a bit of the kind of backbone structure, if you will, to get this done. And I love the detail on it. I'm really excited to see this one come to life. There's quite a bit of back stitching in the motifs, but I think totally worth it, because when you look and see how those look once the back stitching is done, I think it really pops everything off the background. So, okay, so that was the non-full coverage piece I worked on. Now, January, I have two challenges that I'm working on from the Full Coverage Fanatics group. So the first is the bookshelf challenge, which we're doing one type of book each month, and we've picked 3 books that you have to stitch the page count times 10. So January we're doing the classics, and I have stitches towards Pride and Prejudice and The Great Gatsby. I have finished those 2 books. Excuse me. I've also been working on the January standalone challenge, which is the bingo prompts. And I have gotten the top row across done, declared bingo, so that's 5,000 stitches, and I managed to do it all on one project, which was my stitching shelf. So this is an Amy Stewart artwork and charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. I'm stitching it 1/1 full crosses on 25 count. So for this go round, I finished this page. So this is the page that has this lady on it. It was kind of half of that poster. So from there over to there. Finished up the balloons. And then I started on this section, and I decided that this is the last part of this row. It's a page and a little bit. And rather than do the little bit separately, I'm just opting to do everything there. It'll wind up, the chart version I have is the large format, so the pages are smaller than normal Haid pages, but by doing this one this way, adding in this extra bit, it winds up being about the same as a full normal format Haid page, so 8,000 stitches, give or take. So let's see, I used this for the bingo prompts for hot beverage, because this has like hot mulled wine over here on the table. I used it for birds. It has, if I can show this, birds at the feet are here, but then it also has an owl and a couple other different ones further down in the design. What else did I use it for? I can't remember, and I didn't bring my bingo card up. It's the whole top. It's the whole top theme. Anyway, so it was 1,000 stitches per prompt, and I was able to get that accomplished and feel pretty good about how it's looking. I don't know if I can get it all in the frame. There we go. I think that's pretty close. So this one will go away for a little while. I have as my year's goal for all of my full coverage pieces to put 10,000 stitches into them. So that's 5 already for that one. So the rest of the month, I have 6 days left. So starting tonight, I'm going to be working on Winter's Encounter, which is the one of the horse and the little chickadee. I'll bring that next time to show you. So I'm just going to work on that and get however many stitches into that I can. I don't think that I will get another whole book done. I can't remember what the count is, but it's fairly hefty for Little Women for the January books. But I may try to just go ahead and put as much into that as I can, and then the next time that project is out for whatever book prompt, I'll use it and try to finish up Little Women plus whatever month that is. Going forward next month, obviously I'll be working on Celtic Wheel for 10 days. That's easy. We've got the bookshelf challenge for Full Coverage Fanatics next month is going to focus on romance themed books. And let's see if I've got that written down on those 3 books. I will just say that I know that one of the 3 books is Outlander, and it's like 8,000 stitches. I will not get that one done. I just know that. However, I'm going to be using Once Upon a Fairy Tale for at least one of those books. One of the themes, and I'm trying to tie the themes that we're doing to a specific number of stitches that matches one of the books. So one of the themes is couples, and that has the king and queen, or the prince and princess, depending on what you want to call them, as well as like a pair of knights and certain other twofer things on that design. So I'm going to be using Once Upon a Fairy Tale for that, and I'm also going to be using that for, we have a weekend challenge in February in Full Coverage Fanatics, which is Big Strides. So choose your largest one, and since that's supersize max color, that's my biggest one. I'm probably going to try to work on some other things as well, some other larger full coverage projects as well, but I haven't decided yet what that might be. I'm going to kind of see how I go. February, we just have a bunch of things going on in February. I teach one weekend. I have another weekend that's kind of blocked out where I'm not sure how much I'm going to get accomplished. So we'll see. It's just really going to depend on what I have time for. But more for full coverage will be out. I probably won't work on anything that's not full coverage except for Celtic Wheel, because I'm trying to kind of focus away on that and get her done. It'd be nice to have it finished by the end of March. If I have to pull a couple extra days in April, I will, but if I can stick to just kind of trying to meet my goals in the quarterly fashion that I have divided up that I talked about in my other video, then that's what I'm going to do. Links to the full coverage group down below. If you are interested, please feel free to come and join us. Just a note, if you are already in the group and you invite somebody, please let them know that they need to answer the 3 questions we have set up. We have those put together to try to keep down the spammers in the group, and if you don't answer them, we're not going to approve you for it. They're super straightforward, easy to answer. Please just pop in there and do that, and then we can get you signed up, and you can help help yourself with all of our challenges and things that we have going on over the course of the year. Kim and I worked on the handout for the March challenge, which is going to be a month-long challenge, and we're both pretty excited about it because I think it's going to be kind of similar to bingo, and so I think folks are really going to enjoy the different options for that, and we'll be announcing more details on that later in February. Okay, I think I have talked to you long enough. I think this is going to be close to an hour. I apologize if you're not into long videos, but I will put timestamps as usual so you can find stuff. If you've stuck with me for the whole shebang, thank you for joining me today. If you're a new viewer, welcome, and I hope that you enjoyed the video today. If you're a returning viewer, thank you as always for spending some time with me. I enjoy interacting with you all and always love to hear your comments and questions and all of that good stuff. I'm going to try to be back a shorter amount of time so you guys do not have to slog through quite as much content for my next go round, but I'm not sure exactly when that will be, so stay tuned and I will talk to you soonly. I hope everybody's staying well and safe and all of that good stuff, and that your new year in 2021 is off to a good start. So I will talk to you guys soon. Take care, everyone.